Ladies and gentlemen, big hairy news.
Hey, kia ora koutou e te whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hero News. Kia ora, Chewie. How are you, love?
I'm okay, I think. So hard to.
What was that? That looked like something big was coming that turned into something small, and
I was just like, oh yeah, no, big entrance, and then you asked me how I was, and I was like, I don't know, how I am. Am I okay?
Kathy K says, "What's up?" And the reason I'm bringing that up was I came across a YouTube video the other day. It popped up in my algorithm, and it said the 10 most iconic television adverts, and that was one of them, obviously, along with Jean-Claude Van Damme spreading between the two Volvo trucks. And interesting to have a look back over the past kind of 20 or 30 years, and you go, "Oh, yeah, I remember that. Oh, I remember that." Oh, sorry. We're not diverting today because we've got Robert Patman with us, and we want to get him home as quickly as possible.
You told
into Beardy Pies. Before we do that, though, I have spoken to Tory Whanau this afternoon. There is an interview coming up on the show. It's a pre-recorded interview, so apologies, your questions aren't going to get asked to Tory. And I will tell you one thing as a bit of a teaser. Since that interview has been recorded, I have had some sources tell me some information about what the right is going to do to Tory Whanau this week. So we have the interview. She talks about you wait for the attacks that will come against her. That's what she's saying. And since that's happened, I've had some people I trust tell me about what some of those attacks are going to be. And we'll talk to you about those after the actual interview. Right, we're also going to have a look, and I'm sure most of you have seen it, a couple of questions between Bomber and Chloe from tonight's Bradbury Group. That'll be coming up as well, looking at Iran and looking at David Seymour. But for now, let us welcome to the show Professor Robert Patman. Robert, good afternoon, evening to you.
Good evening to both of you.
You must be a busy boy at the moment. Everyone wanted to talk to like the international relations professor.
Yeah, it's been quite busy, but you know, it's. I think that's the case for many people who have an interest in international relations. It's scary, but also fascinating, and yeah, and we're in the situation where hopes were raised we were going to have a ceasefire, and now that seems to have been dashed, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. Like in the middle of the 6 o'clock news live, 6:35, I think they came out and they said, the ceasefire has been reached. And 3 minutes ago, the ceasefire has been broken. So we'll get to talking about that. But here's the first thing I wanted to ask you about. We heard Donald Trump, in the last 24 hours, saying, ceasefire, it's all over. I have fixed everything. And it just gave me that feeling that we've all had before about President Bush going mission accomplished. Now, we know what happened after that, and others have got the same gist of me because people are already making Donald Trump memes with mission accomplished. This is such a fast-moving conversation, Robert. Probably by the time we re-upload this clip tomorrow morning, all this information will be null and void. But can you just explain it all to us? What's going on?
Where do you want to start?
Solve the whole problem for us is what I'm asking, Robert. Make it all make sense. No confusion, please.
Well, let's start off by just quoting someone today who's the General Secretary of NATO, who said that Mr. Trump's bombing of Iran to neutralize the nuclear capabilities was consistent with international law, which bewilders me because I think most of us and our listeners and viewers will be familiar with this. About 10 days ago, getting on for 2 weeks now, actually, Israel launched a preemptive and illegal attacks against a sovereign state, Iran. Now, I've got no brief for the clerical regime in Iran. I think it's a pretty awful government by most standards. But Iran has effectively declared it doesn't want nuclear weapons, a position it still says now. And it's also a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means that it continues the nuclear facilities that it has. It wants to develop civilian nuclear power generation. A number of countries in the world have this without having nuclear weapons. Germany and Japan both are nuclear powers, but they have forsworn the weapons option. And that's what the Iranian government said it wants. And this whole situation, to some extent, and there is a certain irony about the situation that Mr. Trump and Mr. Netanyahu both saying they can't tolerate the prospect of Iran having a nuclear capability, because those two individuals played a huge part in removing the restraints from Iran in the first place. Because you recall in 2018, the deal that Mr. Obama negotiated, President Obama negotiated, involving China. So a good friend of Iran was involved in the deal. And effectively, in return for lifting sanctions, Iran effectively gave a commitment not to develop nuclear weapons for the foreseeable future. And that deal was working, according to the former Secretary of State, John Kerry. Mr. Trump comes in declaring it's the worst deal he's ever seen, and that he put something better in its place. The only problem is he didn't succeed in that quest. He didn't put something in its place. The Iranians were very offended by the Americans unilaterally pulling out of a deal that had been painstakingly negotiated. And since then, Iran has, in a sense, felt unrestrained compared with the deal that it was previously subject to. And Netanyahu played a big role in Trump pulling out of that deal. And in fact, Netanyahu opposed the deal in the first place, which basically meant that Iran didn't, have a diplomatic option to not have nuclear weapons. And the reason Netanyahu didn't want a diplomatic deal was because he doesn't trust the regime. He believes they will, even if they sign a deal, they will secretly renege on it. And
kind of like America did. Kind of like how America reneged on their deal. Yeah.
Well,
just putting it out there.
And that takes us to the present situation. Fast forward to the second Trump administration. Trump came in and said that he was a peace president and that he didn't want America to be engaged in forever wars in the Middle East. And he actually set the goal of having 60 days of negotiation with the Iranian leadership. The problem was, from what we've learned, halfway through these negotiations, about round 3, the Americans moved the goalposts according to the Iranians. So I can't independently verify this. All I can do is repeat what the Iranian version is. But the Iranians said, initially, the Trump administration accepted what the Obama administration accepted, that, like other countries in the world, Iran was free to develop nuclear power for civilian purposes, but not for military purposes. But by round 3, Steve Witkoff apparently told them, no, you can't have a nuclear capability per se, and you've got to give up any commitment to developing nuclear energy for civilian purposes. And they were due to have a 6th round of talks, and before they could have a 6th round of talks, the Israelis attacked Iran. And the interesting thing was, they didn't just attack their nuclear facilities. They attacked their military capabilities and also key parts of the infrastructure of that country. And what started off as a quest to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities quickly became regime change. So your parallels with Iraq in 2003, Pat, are pretty uncanny. And the even stronger parallel that we haven't mentioned so far is that the premise in which the Americans subsequently joined in about 9 days into the assault by Israel on Iran, the Americans came in another surprise attack. The premise for doing so was that Iran was supposed to be on the verge of having a nuclear weapon, despite the fact that the International Atomic Energy Agency said no. There was no sign, and they're in the country, by the way, unlike Mr. Trump.
Well, we got to make sure this is clear.
No
It's
sign.
like as did the CIA, as did the Navy, as did the Army,
And
as
again,
did
Trump
Tulsi
overrode his
Gabbard,
own
all of those
intelligence,
people.
Director. So Tulsi Gabbard. So
Yeah.
it had parallels of the weapons of mass destruction that Iraq supposedly possessed, and they could never find them after they invaded Iraq in 2003. So I think you're quite right to be skeptical about claims that the mission was completely successful. What baffled me is when Mr. Trump made his victory speech after the dropping of the bunker busting bombs, he said the whole Iranian nuclear capability had been obliterated, and it was a spectacular success. But of course, many nuclear analysts quickly pointed out, well, he hasn't visited the spot yet. He hasn't done what they call battleground verification. So how can he make that claim?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where we're at. And unfortunately, as you said in your comments, there was a brief flicker of hope today that there was going to be a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, but that seems to have already been broken.
Tonight we're going to play a question that Bomber asked Chloe, and it was a really interesting one. If I can paraphrase it, it was something like the Western world gets up in arms when Russia drops bombs on a sovereign country independent of them, and we all say evil, wrong, bad, breaking every war crime in the world. Yet it's pretty much, first of all, there's no good guys here. No one's saying we support the Iranian regime either, but the idea that they have just done what Russia did and they're trying to sell that means it's okay because they wear the white hats.
Well, what's very worrying about this situation, it's not that anyone particularly likes the Iranian regime, but putting aside the nature of the regime in question, Iran does have under the UN Charter, does have certain rights. It's a sovereign state. And let's be quite clear, Iran would not be attacked in this fashion if it had nuclear weapons. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, all this attack will achieve is to accelerate the trajectory of Iran towards nuclear weapons. Because if you're sitting in Tehran, the lesson you would take from this is Israel would not have attacked us if we have the nuclear weapons that they currently have. And that's the crucial point here that few people discuss. Two nuclear armed states attacked a country which was in negotiations. Now, what I hope for when Israel launched that attack, I hope that Mr. Trump would have his Eisenhower moment. And that what I mean by that is, of course, in 1956, Eisenhower turned on Israel after he learned that Israel had secretly conspired with the French and the British to launch a military operation to seize and privatize the Suez Canal. And that operation failed, but not before the Americans disowned the Israelis and told them he would not support this. I thought that Trump, having seen his negotiations with the Iranian leadership sabotaged by Netanyahu, might spell out a few home truths to Netanyahu, but he didn't. He just remained quiet. And of course, that does bring into question whether those negotiations were a bit of a diplomatic smokescreen for a military operation that was being jointly planned.
Hey, Robert, that's it. That's our time with you. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
No, do you have any questions? Sorry.
Well, Chewie didn't get a chance to say anything because I used up all your time. Chewie, have you got a question that you want to throw at Robert?
I have one.
Yep.
Trump has built his career and I guess his mystique, his personal brand around being the deal maker. Being that it seems every deal that he has put together at his turn of the wheel has fallen apart. Do you think he's close to realizing that he's not a great deal maker?
Well, if he is, he wouldn't share that recognition with the rest of the world. I think one of Trump's great principles is even when you're a failure, never admit it. And it's always
Asking a
the other guy's
narcissist to
fault.
have insight, asking a narcissist to have reflective insight might be a stretch too far, Chewie.
Yeah. I think Trump declares victory even when he suffers the most abject reversal. So I don't think that, and it's worked for him. People say, well, why
Yeah.
does he say things which are so evidently untrue? What, you hear journalists say, they say, why does he keep saying this? We all know it's untrue. Well, the reason he says that is because it works for him.
Yeah.
If you've been economical with the truth and it got you the most powerful office in the world, you're not going to stop doing it when you get the office because it works for you. So I don't think we can expect any sort of, come back to Chewie's question, any outbreak of reflection and recognition that his diplomatic skills may be more limited than he had sold to the public.
Oh,
Hey,
could
Robert.
you imagine though?
Yeah, it would be. Wouldn't that be he'd finally have a top rating television show again if he came out and said that. It would be the biggest rating anything in the world if he was reflective and humble. Hey, Robert, thanks for joining us tonight, mate.
Thanks,
Hope all
Pat.
your
Thanks, Drew.
essay and exam marking's going well. We appreciate you giving us a few minutes.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
All the best. I just thought,
Cheers,
Chewie, and now I saw this this afternoon, but I didn't queue it up, and I think I've queued it up okay because we were talking about regime change. Seth Meyers did a bit on regime change where he's done the work for us. So I'm pretty sure this is the right spot to make sure people are aware that up until very recently, Donald Trump was not into regime change. For those who are on the audio podcast, we're starting with a clip from the 1st to the 5th, 2024, and then going through many, many other examples.
Decided to use magnets. We're going to use magnets to lift up the elevators with 7 planes on them. Think of it, magnets. Now, all I...
That's what I'm going to do once I dig my...
That's not the clip. That's why I should have queued up beforehand. I'll go one more.
That
shall
was
I?
very confusing.
Yeah, that was not the clip. That's why. That's what happens when you're supposed to queue it up before you do it. Anyway, Donald Trump has an absolute, has hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of talking about not being into regime change and having the last president being terrible at it, yada, yada, yada. What I might do is when we're playing the interview, I might try and find it on my phone, then play it for you guys afterwards. I'll be able to get the code numbers, the queue numbers. Apologies about that. Anyway, there's a couple of super chats there, Chewie. Let's get to that. Donna says, the everything protest / Hui 19, 20, 21 July Beehive steps, bring your flags and signs, white supremacists and Destiny's Church not welcome. Okay, keep an eye on that one. Citizen Gold, Trump is an arsonist firefighter wanting credit for putting out the fire that he started. Yeah, it is very much like that, isn't it? JC and the Pigeon Cats. What is the relationship between skin melatonin levels and a people's right to decide who melatonin? Melatonin? It's melanin.
He's
isn't it?
put melatonin, which is a different thing. Melanin.
Melanin. Yeah. How dark their skin is, and people's right to decide who should or should not have nuclear weapons. Yeah, this is the thing that, and look, I mean, like, I think that what we have to do is go by the rule of law. Again, since 1979 in particular, you look at photos of Iran pre-1979, and it looks like a paradise. People walking around, free place, and then 1979 when it all changed. It hasn't been a good place. People get put to death there for all sorts of terrible things. There are governmental organizations that shut down free. It's not a good place. It's not, well, that sounds like I'm saying the people there. The leaders of the government level is not good, right? So it's understandable why some people are kind of going, well, it's good these guys aren't getting a nuke, but we have to follow rule of law. It's a little bit like, now, sorry, this is a bit of a parallel, but it's a little bit like you don't need to defend free speech for people who are never pushing the boundary. Right? You only have to defend free speech for people who say horrific things. You only really have to defend the rule of law for people who are going to break the law. So like because if these guys don't get the right to follow rule of law, who would? And they might have got the wrong way around there in my head for a second, but basically all we've got is rule of law, and rule of law says pretty clearly you don't just bomb a sovereign country, no matter how good or bad they are. I guess putting it this way, without reason, without cause, and everything about this is actually worse than Iraq, because the intelligence communities were telling Bush there are weapons of mass destruction. There are weapons in Iraq. You know, we do need to look out for these weapons. And so they went in. Whereas in this instance, the intelligence agencies are saying there's not. And Trump's done it anyway. So it's actually worse than that. And if Bush was a war crime, then war criminal, I should say, sorry, then Trump is so much more over of one. Sorry, there's a lot of thoughts there, Chewie. If you want to jump in on any of that before.
Oh, I've got so many thoughts as well. Look, if America's going to talk about regime change, all I would say is you first. Why don't you start at home? The history of Iran from the mid 20th century on is just the shining example of the West fucking with the Middle East, and is doing it for oil. It has always been that case. It's either the great European powers just pointing to places in a map and going, this is a country now, or you've got BP basically setting global foreign policy for other governments. You know, they overthrew a democratic regime in the 50s for oil, and they installed a family of demons with the Shah. And then, because he was a madman and he was just black bagging people into torture facilities for decades, people rose up and kicked him out. And they kicked the Americans out because they quite rightly identified that the Americans put him there. And because when a revolution comes from that status, an incredibly punitive, overbearing police state, of course, you got a grab bag of Islamic fundamentalist nutters on a violence kick. And they went crazy. And it's just been holding on to power ever since. And do you know what makes it really easy to hold on power? When you have a huge, overbearing, outside enemy that everyone remembers as being bad.
Yeah.
You can hold on to power.
You're the defender. You're the defender of the people, if you can do that. If you've got
we remember what these guys did to us, right? So you've got to do what I tell you. Like, fuck the Iranian regime. But I'm sure the Iranian people want some respite from both madmen outside their borders and within. You know, they should be an incredibly prosperous country.
Yeah.
If people just left them alone. I'm personally of the mind that if the only nuclear armed state that has attacked every single one of its neighbours constantly since its formation, if they have nukes, and that's okay, then why don't we let the Iranians develop their nukes, and maybe everybody can have a big old think about whether it's worth launching a clandestine air raid with no warning.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing that's going to calm down. Like, it's madness. We're seeing, not just with the Middle East, but also with Ukraine, we're seeing key, really important negotiations and painfully negotiated agreements just fall apart. One of the things with Ukraine was, we will give up all of our nukes. We will dismantle everything. As long as we get an agreement from Russia and the United States that we'll be safe. Well, everyone's apparently walked away from that and put it in the too hard basket.
Yeah.
And Trump is so fucking brain rotted. He's not a reader. He watches TV. He's gone all Jack Bauer on this and gone, I now have the power to fucking YOLO 6 stealth bombers across the world and do whatever I want. Like, it is madness. And the fact that things like the Football World Cup and the Olympics are still happening in America is crazy. It is crazy to me that America is not facing some sort of sanctions, but of course they won't. They hold a veto in the UN.
Yeah.
So nothing can ever happen without Russia agreeing to it. Nothing can happen without the US agreeing to it. And if they're the bad guys with their fist in the cookie jar, then nobody can do anything. My question is, how many countries have learned the lesson from Afghanistan and Iraq and gone, maybe we won't go in a coalition?
Yeah, maybe we're out this time.
We can't do this again.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Keir Starmer over in the UK, and I go, you look like you didn't learn those lessons.
Well, and look what's happened with Australia in the last 36 hours. Oh, Albanese, yeah, Uncle Donald, we're on board. It's like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
I want to show people this, and I'm sure people have seen this. Peter says Trump wanted a SEAL Team 6 moment like Obama had. But just if you haven't seen this, I'm sure many of you have. This is Iran pre-1979. Right, this is before the Revolutionary War. If you look to the right at those photos, this is how life was lived in Iran pre-1979. And it's all changed. Look, and look, that could be London, you know?
And look, you get very similar images if you look up Afghanistan from the same time period. And again, absolutely shat on by world powers with far-reaching, far down the line consequences. I mean, in the late 70s and all the way through the 80s, if terrorism was happening, like Islamic terrorism was happening, it was Iranian backed. Like, there is no doubt about that, because that's what they had. All the hijackings and hostage takings and bombings and all of that. They were incredibly prevalent in that. And then it started to ramp down. You know, but I think Trump still thinks it's the 80s. He still thinks he's fighting the Soviet Union. But he also wants to be friends with the Soviet Union. It's so bizarre. Like,
Well,
I think
he owes Putin. I think most people think Putin's got something over on him, or he owes Putin, or he's got financial dealings with Putin. I think most people are pretty clear on that, because there's no other way for it to make sense.
I think for Dr. Patman and people just like him, I think that the hardest thing about this is that Trump, you can't compare Trump to literally any other statesperson in history, because he is mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he doesn't have the intellectualism, he doesn't have the strategic thought, he doesn't have sanity surrounding him. He just has a circle of yes men. You know, the fact that he is going out and saying, I did this, I made this deal, it's definitely happening, 12-day war, victory lap, all of this sort of stuff. He can get away with it because the people that support him don't care about the fact checking. They will take Lord Trump at his word every step of the way.
Yeah. Now, look, I think I found this piece off Seth Meyers. I did a bit of searching through YouTube in the actual using the keyword regime. So this is Trump talking about, stupid Bush regime change.
We must abandon the failed policy of nation building and regime change. The job of the United States military is not to wage endless regime change wars. We're not looking for regime change. We've learned that lesson a long time ago. We do not seek regime change. We do not seek regime change. We're not looking, by the way, for regime change. We're not looking for regime change. I just want to make that clear.
I'm against it.
So I will get away from Seth. And then, of course, later in the show, Seth brings it all back together when it gets confirmed that maybe Trump is pretty keen to look for a regime change.
President Trump is floating the idea of regime change in Iran.
He wrote, it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? And
there you go. So, you know, it's not even hidden anymore, Chewie. It's like, This is where we are in politics, and we're going to talk a bit about David Seymour later on tonight. They don't need to hide it before. It's not cloaking. There's no deep throat anymore. It's someone on Twitter just spelling out what's going on. You know, that's where we're at in society and politics in 2025. It's not Deep Throat
one-off.
unless that's their Twitter handle. Then it might be Deep Throat. So anyway.
I want to. This ride is scary now.
Want to say hello, and obviously we had Robert on, and Robert had a limited amount of time, and we wanted to honour that, so we didn't say hello to you all first. So hello, hope you're all doing well. Very good to see you all. Want to say a huge thanks to our patrons, and some of you may or may not have already seen the Tory Whanau interview that's up there. We're going to play that for you shortly, though, as well. And also reminding you that the shop is currently open. In fact, I got a bit caught up today, so we got some things out on couriers today. There'll be some more going out tomorrow for people who have orders still waiting, and then we will come back to you with some more exciting news on the whole merch shop next week. If you'd like to be a part of what we do, patreon.com/BigHeroNews, and of course that merch store is bhnshop.nz. Anything in the chat? Anything you want to get to, Chewie, before we keep trucking?
I have not been paying attention to the chat, Pat. I am very sorry. And I'm sorry for you, chat, because I haven't been.
Well, how about we have a chat with Tory Whanau now? I think that might be a lovely thing to do. I was lucky enough to have Tory this afternoon for 20 minutes. In the weekend, of course, Tory talked a bit about, put out a letter, open letter to the Prime Minister, talking about the behaviour of David Seymour. I have to be honest, there is some conversation in here that I hadn't heard of before to do with what actually does happen after, particularly a female gets outed. What's the right word? Gets eyeballed by David Seymour, gets singled out. That'll do. Singled out by David Seymour. And since I've had this conversation, you have a listen to some of the stuff Tory says in here about what's going to happen to her. I've actually had I have a pretty good understanding from a source to say there is some stuff coming out in the next few days about Tory Whanau, which is exactly what she's talking about when the right, I don't think she used the term the right, start to then go after her to pull her credibility down. I'll tell you about that after the interview. Is there anything you want to say or anything before we actually push the go button, Chewie?
No, I'm really interested to see this. So
very interesting conversation with Tory. I'm really glad she gave us some time. And here you go. And a big welcome to the show, Wellington Mayor Tory Whanau. Tory, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Kia ora.
I was just saying to you before we started, I think this is our first official hello. So hello and nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I've been looking forward to this. So.
Oh, cool, man. What I want to ask you about your stuff as well. Maybe we'll do that at the end because it's interesting. Because I know you're not re-standing for the mayoralty.
Yes.
But maybe we'll get to that at the end should we find time, because kind of the topic du jour today, which is going up and going around the media again, is our French Canadian friend, Mr. David Seymour, and his comments and his apparent lackadaisical attitude towards what some are describing as bullying online, like if anyone else did it. Now, look, I'm not going to be too precious about it. I don't think it's particularly serious and stuff what he's doing as a human being, but as a acting Prime Minister and Minister of the Crown, that does give perhaps a different expectation of behaviour that he doesn't seem to be fulfilling. So why don't we do this? And the reason I say this is hanging around is because this is a news story today. And this was a conversation over the weekend, and this was from a stand-up yesterday. So I believe you enacted or certainly spoke out for the first time in the weekend. So before we go to what we were at now, tell us why you started a public conversation around this and around what David Seymour and ACT are doing with their ridiculing of people who don't agree with them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I saw it kick off around about Saturday on Blue Sky. And I'd seen a report by an academic who reported that Matiria Ture, after she'd been put up as one of his posts, the level of misogyny, racism and online abuse escalated quite significantly. So I looked into it more, and I hadn't actually realised at that point that he'd spoken about several academics, but also the Christchurch Council. And, jokes or lols or whatever, referring to council staff as Putin and labelling academics as derangement syndrome or whatever, I just thought is pretty unbecoming of an acting Prime Minister. But what bothers me the most, and I'm sure that he knows that every time he criticises someone, it leads to that online wave of his support groups and his trolls towards these people.
To be fair, and I apologise that I didn't know this, we talked a bit about this last night, and we talked about they would unleash his incel foot soldiers on the people, but I hadn't actually heard whether it happened or not. So you're saying the reports from the weekend you saw is Miteria was getting some extra attention once Seymour had put out his derangement syndrome tweet. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Sanjawa, I believe, who's an expert on disinformation and online extremism, he analysed like 1,200 Facebook comments, and there was certainly a significant spike after that post had been made. And even when, so I put up my letter online and stuff, I decided to take action, and now he's sending his people after me. And it's just such a pattern. It's an ongoing pattern that we saw with him, but we saw it with the previous Deputy Mayor, Winston Peters, as well, is when they vocalise these quite harmful views, whether it's a joke or not, they might think it's lighthearted, but it doesn't, it's not lighthearted for the person they intend it for because of the political landscape online. Yeah. And as someone who's experienced this for the last couple of years, this is why I'm so passionate about it. What it can really do to someone is completely. Well, the intention that it has, and we know this from kind of like playbooks from overseas, is that it seeks to dehumanize the expertise at large and create distrust in that person for simply having a view against what he believes in. And that has a kind of a dangerous sort of ongoing impact. And what I also dislike is between him and the previous Deputy Prime Minister is the general behaviour of calling people names. And referring to an MP as a pedophile, that they're moving the goalpost of what is acceptable behaviour for those in public office. And in my view, that's just not okay. And if we don't challenge it now, it just becomes normalised.
There is also that huge irony is that these people who you're talking of, Mr. Peters, Mr. Seymour, in the last month or so have come out very aggressively against, I think it might have been Chloe, talking about imported culture wars. And what they're doing is literally an imported culture war from America. It's Trump derangement syndrome. It's calling Democrats, groomers. It's literally what they are coming out saying. Oh, look at these lunatics saying this, but they are demonstrating, they are affirming the accusation that's been made about people importing culture wars.
Oh, absolutely. And then they kind of give themselves a protective layer going, oh, I'm just kidding. That doesn't make it acceptable.
Or I'm just asking questions. That's
I'm just asking questions. And look, in the past when I've received comments from, online trolls or whatever, I just kind of ignore it because it's on me and I don't want to amplify the situation. What's different about this is that he's going after a number of people. And so I felt some sort of civic duty to speak up on behalf of them. But again, for me, it's about our current government moving the goalposts for what is acceptable behaviour for the executive. Let alone public office, and it's not allowing, our public servants, our academics, or even the general public to feel intimidated by submitting or participating in a democratic process in future. This is democracy. So, and I find it really funny that, he talks about how important freedom of speech is and their lobby groups as well. But the second people do it in a democratic nature, they just seem to go off, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's very obvious to most of us observing that there are people, especially on the right, who scream freedom of speech until it's speech they don't like. And then all of a sudden they're all offended, or especially if it's looking around topics which we're not talking about today, like the Middle East. If you share views around that, all of a sudden your speech should be suppressed. I've got a question, though. The question I have is not... the question I have doesn't matter about the serious nature of getting attacked online, but I think it's got a huge implication as to the responsibility for people like Seymour speaking out. Because you said something interesting. You said he set his trolls on us, or you mightn't use the word trolls. Do you think that people like David Seymour, who we're talking about today, actively knows exactly what's going to happen, i.e., can we hold him responsible for the actions of those trolls because he knows what they're going to go and do, or are they doing it sort of and he's just saying stuff that he wants to say?
I would be surprised if he didn't know. I mean, he's been in the game for many years. It's actually, I don't agree with his policies or what he does, but he's actually a seasoned and an effective politician. Look how much power he's been able to gain with even just a minority of votes. So I would say politically, he's probably quite aware of what is happening because, well, it's actually been reported on numerous times in recent days because of the increase in online abuse in general against progressive politicians and women. So surely you'd have to be aware of that. But whether he's sending them off, I don't know. I feel like some of his rhetoric would probably empower certain groups to behave that way online.
It does seem particularly evident that women, and then women of colour, are two of his chosen targets above and beyond anyone else. Statistically speaking, it looks like that it's pretty clear there is a little bit more direction at women and women of colour compared to others in his calling people out for their derangement, quote unquote.
Yeah, the majority are women that I've seen online, and actually that's probably quite common with the Prime Minister and the previous Deputy Prime Minister of their criticisms of other people. You know, progressive, queer, Māori. And this is something I actually saw when I was in Parliament almost 8 years ago. The way that he'd talk about Gaura's Garaman in the media would absolutely spark online violence towards her, which ended up leading to her needing a security escort. So, and I remember calling him back then and saying, hey, can you tone down your public comments? Because it's actually causing safety concerns for Gauras. So he knows about this because we talked about it almost 8 years ago.
So for clarity, and I know you've just said it, but I like to repeat things sometimes to make sure we're all clear. You have a one-on-one personal interaction with him, telling him what this does online if he's not aware, so you can testify that he knows.
Correct. And I said that directly about Gaura's Garaman. And, we came to an agreement on that phone call, but that he, in the end, he didn't really listen. And she continued to receive horrific abuse ongoing. And look what that did to her mental health. And this is the concern I have for our people. She's had a really tough few months, right? She's a close friend of mine and I support her. But just imagine being a refugee into this country and for almost 2-3 years straight, being told at least on a weekly basis, you need to be hanged. And this kind of right-wing derangement system rhetoric, you're so stupid, I'm just kidding, that has a major contribution to this behaviour towards our politicians, and it has a significant impact, as we have seen with Gauras.
It's interesting, and I often talk about the media as the people with access because especially people on the right won't talk to us, for example, and fair play. There's no obligation for them to. But I haven't heard anyone with access, media sitting in Parliament, ask him if he denounces the actions of these trolls, ask him if he would reject the voters of those trolls and see what he's got to say. I know in America, like when it's an extreme version, but when people like Nick Fuentes are often brought up, even Trump was very reticent at kind of saying he didn't want Nick Fuentes' vote. I wish someone with some access would pressure Mr. Seymour on some of those questions and see where he came out, because he has to generate a certain amount of ugliness to sustain the base with the red meat that he's been delivering them over the past 2, 3, 4 years. So, yeah.
Correct.
Let's just have a quick look then. So this is the story that was out. I think this is actually out today. I think so. David Seymour defends posts accusing opponents of derangement syndrome. The Deputy Prime Minister is rubbishing claims that social media posts he has made about opponents of Regulatory Standards Bill are a breach of the Cabinet Manual. Hey, one quick question as a politician yourself. He says, right, they're making this sound like they're his posts. He's not going to be the one posting these. I mean, his name's on it. He's authorised them, but it's going to be an underling that's making up these things and actually putting them out there that way.
Correct.
In your experience, would he have had to authorise it before they went out, those derangement pictures?
Yep. So, you know, my team never post anything without me seeing it first, because in the end, I'm the one that has to take responsibility. If there was a really offensive post on my social media that one of my staff did, well, I would still take responsibility for it because it's my channel and they've received direction from me. So even though he didn't technically press publish, he is responsible for that content.
Yep. 100%. All right. So this is actually, we talked about this last night, and I didn't have this footage to hand. I had watched the press conference yesterday, though. This is David Seymour actually responding to what you've done in the weekend. And so this is his response directly to you.
Can I just ask you about this letter that Tory Whanau has said that she has sent to the Prime Minister, having a bit of a crack at the fact of what she says is, quote, unacceptable behaviour around you targeting people that oppose the Regulatory Standards Bill. She says that it breaches the Cabinet Manual. Just curious about what your response to that is.
So sorry, Tory Whanau is accusing me of inappropriate behaviour.
Yeah,
I've heard it all.
Yeah.
There's no such breach. If people want to go out and make completely incorrect statements, then I'm going to get a bit playful and have some fun with them.
It's just being playful and having a bit of fun with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just back on
I could say other things about them. I could say that their incorrect statements are deliberate and therefore they're lying. I could say they're incapable of understanding what they're saying. I'm not saying that. I'm being a bit playful, saying the only reason I can think of for all these totally factually incorrect statements about the Regulatory Standards Bill is that there's some sort of sinister syndrome out there.
Now, as a communicator and you know, working in radio and stuff for a very long time, one of the things I find fascinating about this is he had an out to go to the next question, and he didn't take it. I'll just play this a little bit again.
Me of inappropriate behaviour.
Yeah.
I've heard it all.
Yeah.
Right there, he's now getting more questions.
Yeah.
The conversation's over, yet he continues for another 30 seconds or so because he basically wants to say people are lying.
Yes.
There's no such breach. If people want to go out and make completely incorrect statements, then I'm going to get a bit playful and have some fun with them.
Stop. That's a statement finished. New questions come in, and then he keeps going.
It's just being playful and having a bit of fun with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I find that from, I guess, an observer of politicians and someone who, communication's my tools, a very interesting decision he chose to make. How do you respond to what he said in there?
So there are a couple of very interesting things, and I agree. So he's given the opportunity to just reiterate his lines and calling people liars, again, dehumanizing people, making them to be the bad people for actually the experts on legislation like this. So, and he's not been held to account for that. And actually, it's the same as, there are a lot of journalists who print his press releases word for word. And what he's saying is not being challenged. So that's very problematic. The other is actually the slight he made towards me and inappropriate behaviour. So watch over the next few days as him and his people aim to dehumanise me over the next few days. I can see it now. And that's why why I'm speaking up is that I'm also trying to kind of build a bit of a kind of for us as a collective. I think it's fantastic that you're talking about this. Radio Wātea did a fantastic job of talking about it because we have to, this is their way of silencing politicians and people, but we have to keep pushing back on it because in the long term, that impacts democracy.
Yeah, silencing dissenters, silencing people
correct.
Who disagree with him. Basically, what's happening is he is calling people deranged who don't agree with him.
100%.
That's it. And just on that note, there's another 30 seconds here from the press conference from yesterday when he was asked directly about calling academics deranged.
So do you stand by your social media team, their comments around Dr. Laking, that he is deranged, the comments that he is making, and that his
because there's been no such comment made. The comment that has been made is that there's some sort of curious syndrome that is causing people to say untrue things.
So he's saying that they didn't call the person deranged, but the curious condition is derangement syndrome. So, splitting hairs.
True things. That is
derangement.
Yes, there's a syndrome, but that doesn't mean that the person's deranged.
So you stand by that comment?
Yes, but not the way you understand it.
So, so that was his response to speaking to others and others about calling other people deranged, that he didn't call them deranged, even though and I am putting air quotes here for the audio podcast, the joke is, the RSB derangement syndrome. So I don't know how someone who has a syndrome that is a derangement syndrome can't then be deranged. That's what they're saying. But that's his offhand response to that. You got any thoughts around that?
Well, again, it just keeps going back to that casting public doubt in these academics who are our smartest people. So calling them deranged or derangement syndrome and liars is actually, it's close to defamation, I would have to say. But again, he's getting away with it. What would be really fantastic is if we saw journalists actually just completely challenging him on that behaviour, or Cabinet Office, the Cabinet Secretary, the Prime Minister going, you know what, this behaviour for a Deputy Prime Minister, Acting Prime Minister, is not okay. Our country expects our leaders to look after us, not make fun of us.
Yeah. And now down to the kind of core of the conversation. I think your complaint, you openly talked about the Cabinet Manual. Here is 2.53, conduct public duty and personal interests in general, to protect the dignity of the decision-making process of executive government and to maintain public trust in the executive, to be able to trust David Seymour, what it's literally saying. Ministers and parliamentary undersecretaries must conduct themselves in a manner appropriate to their office. There is also calls, I'm not sure whether you did this, but 2.56 as well. In all of these roles at all times, ministers are expected to act lawfully and behave in a way that upholds and is seen to uphold the highest ethical and behavioural standards. I don't know how he could say that is not a breach. I mean, you might you might say that it's not the worst crime in the world, but if it's the highest ethical and behavioural. So in other words, if it's not the highest behavioural standard, if you're a little bit bad behaved, then you're in breach of the Cabinet Handbook. It's very clear.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right in saying it's not the worst thing I've heard actually with this government. I've heard, far more harmful things, but this was just, we have a direct connection to the Cabinet Manual here to be able to go, hey, and actually have had enough of this, high school behaviour from some of our ministers. I don't know about you, but I know for me, I've had enough. I just expect better from our elected officials. I would just plead with the Prime Minister, set a standard of your coalition, because then, you start to lose the trust of the public, even just for this government. And is that what they want? I don't know, but yeah.
Hey, Tory, thanks for joining us tonight. Just before we go, not rerunning for mayor, what are your plans for the next, what's the 5-year plan, Tory? What are you looking at doing?
The 5-year plan is that I still intend on being with council. So, I care deeply about our city, and I believe in the long-term plan that we have signed off, because it's a great investment plan and ensures that we're going to get the best outcomes. I decided not to run for the mayoralty because of much of what we've discussed today. It's very difficult being a wahine Māori in a role like this. And I just felt, if I ran for the Māori ward instead, it's a much safer environment. I have one vote, just like the mayor does, and it means I get to work with iwi and be a good role model for rangatahi Māori. It sounded like quite, others would go, oh, she's going backwards. Not at all. It's. I feel like it's an elegant, just taking a back seat for now, so that I can focus on the kaupapa, not some of these theatrics that we're seeing play out now this week.
Any ambitions to get back into the national game with the Greens or anything?
Oh, absolutely. I love community work. I love legislation, progressive legislation, and challenging some of our other politicians who I feel are putting through harmful laws. So one day, look, I'll go and stand for the Greens, but I feel my heart right now is with Wellington City.
I like that you use the word progressive. I was listening to a debate between two people from America. It was a Democrat and a Republican. And the Democrat guy said, or the Democrat supporter said, every policy that's ever moved us forward had been a progressive policy. And he mentioned things like ending slavery and civil rights and that. And of course, the person went, well, that happened under Republicans. And he went, yeah, that's why I'm saying progressive, not Democrat or Republican. Yes, totally. The Republicans, Lincoln was a Republican, but that's when they were the progressive party, didn't become the regressive party. So I like that you said that. Hey, Tory, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I hope we get to chat to you again super soon. This was fun. Well, it's not a fun topic, but it was lovely to meet you and have an actual chat about it. So thanks for giving us some time tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Alrighty, Tory Whanau, Chewie, you can share thoughts.
I am absolutely furious about how much the shitty behaviour and this weaponizing of your online gremlin army is costing us good politicians, people that want to do good things in the community.
Well, hang on, let's be honest, good female politicians, really.
Yes.
I mean,
10 to 1. Let's be honest, good female brown politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the list is in a place where you can't ignore it now. The fact that he went after Materia really set my blood on fire because she was hounded out. You can see the passion that Tory has for what she's doing in Wellington. And she has copped some of the vilest shit that I have seen. And even to have David in that press conference, nudge, nudge, wink, wink at it.
Mm-hmm.
He is a snarky, slimy little dweeb. And I don't know how to stop it, but I want it stopped.
Yeah. I've got some information to share now, and it's from an unnamed source. I won't say where it's come from, but you heard Tory say, you watch over the next week what's going to happen. Subsequent to that conversation, purely by chance, I've heard from a very reputable source that there is going to be some stories in the next few days about Tory Whanau drinking in town. Now, I hear from the source that Tory was out drinking in town, like many of us do, like Winston Peters is famous for doing.
Oh, I was just going to say, the political landscape is littered with people that like a drink because they're people.
But let me say this: my source says, from what they know, Tory was out with a few friends, hanging out, having the odd drink, not pissed, not falling over drunk, not demanding of waiter staff, do you know who I am, National Party? None of that stuff. But I have a source that says that this information will, I guess what I say is may well, get you weaponized this week, even though there's nothing there. So we'll see what happens over the next 24, 48 hours. But yeah, pretty reputable source telling me that a night out with friends, having a few drinks, nothing untoward is about to be weaponized. Watch this space.
I think it's already started. I spotted this not too long ago. Our favourites, the Free Speech Union.
Not a union.
Obviously, not a union. Atlas affiliate, Tentacle, whatever you want to call it. Tory Whanau says academics should be kept safe from criticism. No. Counter speech and calling out ideas you disagree with is exactly how democracy should work. If we don't have free speech, what are we supposed to challenge ideas?
So
what,
you know what?
What a disingenuous post to make.
We all support that. And that's exactly not what has happened. So tonight, right, I'll do a post that says Free Speech Union supportive of trolls making brown women's lives hell. It's the same thing.
The aim of this stuff, the aim that David Seymour has in mind is to cool dissent, to make sure that nobody sticks their head out of their trench and says, hey, I don't think this is right, and here are the reasons why. He has criticised the fact, he has called them liars. He has said that they suffered derangement syndrome, which is, of course, shorthand for the Trump derangement syndrome that they use to criticise anybody that sort of
imported
went, hey,
culture wars.
I don't think Donald Trump's the full quid. Oh, you've got Trump derangement syndrome. It's exactly the same. It's not questioning what they're saying. It's not even debating what they're saying. It's just saying the person that is saying this is a crazy person.
So, can I say this way? That middle paragraph, counter speech and calling out ideas you disagree with is exactly how democracy should work. So
that's what they were
in this instance, it's the academics who are using the counter speech and calling out the ideas you disagree with. It's actually David Seymour who is trying to stop them from doing it. So Free Speech Union think this is a way to support Seymour's idea, but actually Seymour is the one here suppressing free speech. Seymour is not calling out ideas he disagrees with. He's being a troll and he's suppressing speech. So Free Speech Union, are you aware you are against David Seymour in this message? Because if you're not, maybe someone from your PR team needs to change the words a little bit. Because it's not him who is calling out ideas, it's the academics that he is then attacking. He's not attacking their ideas, he's attacking them for calling out ideas they disagree with, much like your message says. You fucking idiots.
You know, our politicians, of course, have their own taxpayer-funded bar in Parliament now, so they can do whatever they want, really. I guess they won't have to run into instances like this where Gary has seen David Seymour consume 5 beers in an hour at backbenches during the parliamentary dinner break and then go back to work.
Gary, if you ever see that again, make sure you record it. That's obviously going to be a big news story if a night out drinking with your friends is going to be one for an elected mayor about to turn down her position because of in part, the harassment and abuse he's receiving online. I think that's actually perfectly valid. Why? I mean, like, please, I'm not suggesting people stalk, but if people out there want to start taking photos, if you see, politicians drinking and that, take a photo of them. Send it to us and we'll highlight it just as much as people are going to highlight potentially, so I'm told, Tory Whanau having a few wines with some friends. Because why not?
I have to make reference to one of those rumours that went around about Tory. Do you remember the one that, like, I think it was mentioned on News Talk and people were making references that there was essentially a sex tape or some sort of activity that was filmed in a Wellington bar and everybody had seen it, but nobody could produce it. And that's just bubbled away. And that's what I think David Seymour was actually referring to in that press conference, which is just so off the chain.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. I really did. I'm actually, I got to the end of it and I wasn't quite sure why I liked it so much, but that felt like a really interesting conversation between two dudes. History Repeats says the short one. Citizen Gold says there's freedom of speech and then there's the consequences of freedom of speech. Anyone exercising the former needs to be aware of the latter. The RSB derangement posters came out of MP Todd Stevenson's office. He's a lawyer. He should know better than to go after members of the public. That's another thing as well. On some level, if you're if you're a public figure, politician, whatever, then certainly the idea of public criticism sort of comes with the job. Materia Ture is not that now. She's a member of the public. Academics aren't that. They're just people who work in universities. To draw focus onto them, and that's why I asked Tory that question, and her position would be, knowing that your army is going to then go after them is really gross. Really gross.
Yeah. And look, as far as the online troll army, that's plausible deniability for David Seymour.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Is it?
Like he'll know it happens, but he can just sit there and go, "Oh well, I can't control what people do online." You know, and it's just, man, you can look at your social media, you can look at X social media and see how many fucking unhinged cretins, racists, bigots, misogynists, all follow you.
But he needs them.
He needs them. It's disgusting.
This is a little bit like Russiagate in America, not the Russiagate, but the streamers who are getting paid $100,000 a month from a group called Tenant Media, who was getting money straight from Russia, and all these guys, all the Dave Rubins and Tim Pauls and that, like, we had no idea. And that's actually, I think that's true. They had no idea, but two things need to be questioned. One is, why did you do no due diligence on where this huge amount of money was coming from? And number two is, when you found out it was from a Russian group trying to aid their propaganda, why do you think they came to you? Why did this group come to these groups to continue the conversation? It's a bit like we always talk about. I accept that Posey Parker probably doesn't want neo-Nazis at her Melbourne protest, whatever she did, her Melbourne event. But one needs to ask the question, what is it about your message that encourages the neo-Nazis to come along and support it? These are the things that you don't have to be responsible for the actions that happen around you. But if the actions happening around you are pretty repugnant and they're attracted to your actions, that might be worth a question or two. There's a text here that I don't really understand, but because it seems like a refresher, meaning we've done this before. What's your favourite colour dinosaur? Have I missed something in this, Chewie, or do you have any idea?
I have no idea, but if we're going to pivot into a dinosaur podcast, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, all right. And Kooky says, I swear to God, one day I will be on time, soz. That's right, mate. Okay, let's get into the last conversation of the show. We are having a look at the Bradbury Group tonight. The Bradbury Group had as their interview Chloe Swarbrick. Oh, and very exciting news this week in Craig Rennie's podcast. Craig Rennie is going through the Green Party budget. Right? He's going to go through the Green Party numbers, and he's going to talk to Chloe about it. So Craig, going through the numbers, talking to Chloe about it in his podcast this week, which will be out Thursday morning. So Chloe is on with Marty, on with Bomber, and I'm just going to play you a couple of the questions. There's about 5 or 6 questions in total, but we don't want to steal all Bomber's content. This is talking about the hypocrisy between people chiding Russia for bombing an independent sovereign nation, but supporting America and probably Israel for bombing an independent and sovereign nation. And that's the conversation between Chloe and Bomber.
I want to start tonight, if I may, Chloe, on this appalling military aggression by Donald Trump, enabling Israel in strikes against Iran and then bombing Iran's nuclear program themselves. We are quick and righteous in denouncing Russia for walking away from the rules-based order. Where is that courage when Western allies are breaching those exact same standards?
I mean, you said it well. I think that this really goes to show the unfortunate walking back that our current government is doing by virtue of not acting on our historical record of standing on our independent foreign policy and being really crystal clear about where human rights need to be upheld. There is one entity in the Middle East that definitively has nuclear weapons, and we know that is Israel.
Right.
We have seen, as you say, the government be incredibly quick to act, including the last government, when it comes to Russia's illegal invasion of and occupation of Ukraine, and that's part of the reason that I drafted my illegal occupation of Palestine sanctions bill with the exact same approach that was taken in that legislation, given that what we're seeing currently unfold in Palestine is, if not far worse.
We had Helen Clark on last week's show, and she was adamant that there is no legal justification for these strikes, and argued that while this is occurring, Gaza and the West Bank are under even greater military violence threat. What should New Zealand be doing here? Should we be expelling the Israeli ambassador?
I mean, we should have done that a long, long time ago when it became abundantly apparent that Israel was not abiding by the international rules-based order. Who are we to say that we expect human rights to be upheld if we're not willing to stand by and ask for them to be upheld ourselves? So yes, Bomber, the government should have moved a heck of a lot quicker. I mean, if we just look at the comparisons with how the government moved with regard to, and this government, when in opposition, called for far faster movement when it came to Russia. But we're not willing to apply those same standards when, as you say, it comes to the actions of our supposed allies. But friends don't let friends abuse human rights.
You like that? Here's a t-shirt. Friends don't let friends abuse human rights. It's a nice one, eh? Very good. Chloe's very good at the sound bites. Friends don't let friends abuse human rights. You're listening, Australia? Australia jumped into bed so quickly with Donald Trump. Remember, he's got a mushroom-shaped penis. You jumped into bed very, very quickly.
Allies. But friends don't let friends abuse human rights. At the end of the day, who do we want to be as Aotearoa in New Zealand? What history do we want to hand down to our kids? What is the legacy that we want to have? What we are currently witnessing, particularly in Gaza, is a live-streamed genocide where people who have been made refugees in their own lands are being mercilessly carpet-bombed. I don't think that there's ever been a more compelling case for the international community to be crystal clear about what we stand for.
The Queen is back. Long live the Queen. What else do you want to say to that, Chewie?
I'm starting to think that we should never let the Israeli ambassador back in the country after Helen Clark kicked him out.
This has all been going on for a very long time, so you have to wonder, don't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing that I keep on coming back to, is Israel is not our friend.
Yeah.
They haven't treated us as a friend or an ally.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, sending Mossad agents here to steal the details of dead New Zealand children so they can make New Zealand passports, because our passport is internationally really well trusted.
Yeah.
So they can send spies into other countries, which then makes it dangerous or more dangerous for everybody traveling on a New Zealand passport. And Helen Clark righteously and rightfully booted them out over that. That was a bona fide international incident, because friends and allies don't do that shit to each other. I'm not sure when we let them back in. I don't see why that's okay. Like,
I'm guessing John Key's responsible for a lot in the world, I'm guessing.
And now we're sitting here, like, and everybody's like, oh, well, they were kind of provoked. And you're like, well, no, historically they're not. They haven't been provoked. Something happened, and there's big questions around what happened and who instigated it, and they lied to the entire world about what happened on that day. There's been multiple statements that were repeated around the world that have been 100% debunked. And then the response to that has been monstrous, and continues to be a stain on the international rules-based order. And everybody's going, come on, Israel. If we just give you another aid shipment full of bombs, will you chill out? No, because nobody can stop you? Oh, okay. Like, why are we involved in that? Like, I understand going up to America and expressing anything other than pure admiration for the titanic genius and physical prowess of Donald J. Trump is probably going to put you on an international sanctions list and have tariffs up the arse. But really, you've got to live with yourself as well. The US is just one country. Surely we can just do trade with all the other ones.
Helen Clark kicked out the Israeli ambassador, I think in 2004, it looks like. June 2005, Foreign Minister Shalom sent a letter of apology to New Zealand. Diplomatic relations were fully re-established 30th of August 2005 when Naftali
That was a
Tamir
mistake.
presented his credentials, which were accepted to Governor-General Dame Sylvia Cartwright before a guard of honour. The Foreign Minister's Deputy Director for Asia and Pacific, Amos Nadav, said, "We are happy the crisis is behind us. We look forward to the future." So
We look forward to a brand new crisis.
Out for about a year.
Just a year.
Looks like it. Yeah. Yep. When Shalom and Jan Henderson, the New Zealand ambassador to Turkey, met for reconciliation talks on 26 October 2005, Israeli government noted that the meeting was first between high-ranking New Zealand and Israeli officials. So yeah, back by 2005, out in 2004, would appear. Well, very rough and brief and quick.
Well, I mean, I know
research.
they've closed I think they've closed their embassy now because of the war. And people are like, well, mission accomplished. No, the Israelis closed their embassy because of the
In New Zealand, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they haven't been, the government hasn't summoned the ambassador. They haven't booted him out or anything like that. It's just their embassy is.
So the ambassador's on holiday in New Zealand at the moment, is what you're saying?
Sounds like it. Sounds like he's not dodging Iranian hypersonic missiles or anything like that in Tel Aviv. But
Hey,
yeah, I mean,
let's. Yep, sorry.
No, I was just going to go on a big tangent of like, do you remember when the world was at least a little bit more sane than it is now?
Nope.
No, you don't remember. Okay.
Well, I mean, you think about the timeline of us. I mean, for most people watching now, probably the last 50 years, maybe the last 40 years. 80s it was all no nukes. 90s there was a desert. The fight in the desert over in Desert Storm is what I'm thinking. Then the early 2000s there was the Twin Towers that flew into Iraq. And
I'm glad you're not in charge of naming the wars, like
the
Trump
desert
is
thing.
now. No, the fight in the desert.
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
what
like,
this war's called, the fight in the desert.
Since the 1980s, I mean, like in the 1970s, you had Vietnam. They didn't finish till about 1975, 1976.
Yeah, all right. Now you're making me think that there hasn't been a decade without some sort of frightening conflict forever.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Except when Auntie Helen was in charge. No, that was.
But would you say the quality of leadership has declined?
Yeah, I mean, all you need to do is, is it Baghdadi, the guy from the desert and the war. Those guys, my brain's turned off.
Desert War.
The
Desert War 2.
The desert and the war people hiding in the caves and Osama, those dudes.
Osama bin Laden.
Yeah. No, didn't Trump got one of the top guys, right? And I've played it before. When you put up Obama saying how they got Saddam,
oh yeah,
and Trump,
and we got him, and he died like a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I won't get credit for this. He says, "Unreal."
There's no, yeah, like future generations are going to watch clips of these historic moments narrated by this meat sack with its soupy brain who just thinks he's the person that's done the biggest, best thing ever nobody's ever seen it like this. And they're like, we've just come from watching clips of Obama. Like, Trump makes Bush seem like an elder statesman.
A Rhodes Scholar, yeah.
Fucking crazy.
Okay, Chewie.
Ridiculed him.
We're halfway through the story. Let's keep going now. Because Bomber then wrapped up with Chloe. And Chloe's got obviously interesting insights into David Seymour because she has been debating him for quite a long time. So Bomber asks Chloe about the ongoing conversations around David Seymour and his attacks on people and what she thinks of it all.
Finally, your thoughts on the ACT Party's social media campaign targeting critics of their regulatory standards bill.
I'll give you a preview. She basically calls him a little bitch, basically.
Why would the party of free speech actively attempt to strangle others' free speech?
Nailed it. That's it, really, isn't it? Like, I mean, look, I've been put on breakfast panels and debates with David Seymour since I was 22 years old.
And you beat him, every time. You beat him every. You do. I'm keeping count. I'm keeping count.
I know. Well, I was on your show back in 2016 when I was running for local body elections, but nonetheless, we digress. But what I have seen time and again is a man whose rhetoric is championing freedom of speech, but when push really comes to shove, he attacks people individually, personally, and on an ad hominem basis. And in addition to that, he can give it, but he can't take it. And I just frankly, like at this point in the way that politics is working in modernity, New Zealanders deserve a heck of a lot better.
As I said, he can give it, but he can't take it. That's polite speak for he's a little bitch. Chewie.
He's a little bitch. And the only thing that he hides behind is I was just joking, lol. And he clearly thinks highly of himself as someone that is funny. and I've never seen it. It's just calling something a joke to get away with being punched in the mouth. Yeah, does not work.
It's the journalists or it's the interviewers version of I'm just asking questions, questions, just asking questions. You know.
Somebody got offended of my little joke, that I made from my little joke book.
Now, Whanau, there's lots going on at the moment. Believe it or not, I've put in a request to the ambassador for Iran to come talk to us. I think it's pretty unlikely, but we aim for them.
Swing for the fences.
I've got a confirmation at one stage from Helen Clark to come join us. Just trying to work all that out, it's a busy old time. It's actually quite tough putting the show together at the moment because there's so much going on, and so I think it's really important for us to keep up with what's going on in the Middle East. But as we've had said in the last couple of days, it's also incredibly important for us not to forget about other things happening in the Middle East as well. So we will keep you up to date with what's going on. Yes, Chewie, thank you for the eternal memory in the background there as well. And so we will keep bringing you, it's going to be some of the biggest stories and some of the stories that I think will interest us and some of the stories that we need to know about over the next wee while. Before we head off, Kiwi Bird says, Chloe, beating Seymour since age 22. Yes. You marked a couple there as well. What did you say? David Seymour uses ad hominem arguments. Refers to rhetorical strategy where the speaker attacks the character, motive, attribute of the person making an argument rather than substance. And Gary says, play the, quote, which nation was the US invading or interfering with the year before you were born game? It's hours of fun. Are you doing it now? Which nation was the US invading or interfering with in the year you were born? I'm going to say Afghanistan for you, actually.
No, too early. That would have been Russia. 1980. The US was not involved, not as in bold and highlighted, in any major invasions. However, the US did experience significant crisis with the Iran hostage crisis, which began in November 1979 and continued throughout 1980. Additionally, the Iran-Iraq War began in September of 1980, but the US didn't directly invade any other country. It was obviously funding Iraq and arming Iraq to have a crack at Iran.
That ended well, for them when they funded Iraq for that. That was it's like when they
it was great.
When they funded those freedom fighters in Afghanistan. That ended well for them as well. They didn't take them 20 years to cut 20 years and the loss of, I think it's 5,000 soldiers to end up with an ugly draw. So good on you, America, for funding those freedom fighters as you were funding them.
Have I ever told you about something I read about the CIA and the Mujahideen in Afghanistan?
Don't think you've
one
told
of
us that.
One of
it's
the
a short
things
story.
The CIA. Shut up, Pat. I've got 6 minutes. The CIA, as well as weapons, also delivered edited versions of the Quran. Where they absolutely overemphasized the fact that you should kill infidels and invaders. And that little thing, because it was only ever going to affect the Russians, right?
Yeah, of course.
Which it did. But yes, there were an entire generation of Afghanis that were raised on this basically hyper-violent, sexed up version of the Quran.
Delivered by the Americans.
That's what the Americans walked into when they invaded Afghanistan. So, never consider unintended consequences. It's just very boring.
Arvid says, David Seymour is that guy you like. You're like, I just got to get through HS and I'll never see him again. But now he's Deputy Prime Minister. It does feel like he has this aura around him of unlikable kid at school trying to get everyone to like him. That's what the aura he's got around him. So when he talks about these jokes that he makes, he's trying to impress people. It's like, as the Deputy Prime Minister, I guess you'd say probably not the same as America, but sort of second most powerful person in the country when it comes to politics. He's still trying to get validation from the cool kids. That's what it feels like. He's trying to get validation from the cool kids, and the cool kids, who are the Greens, just in case you're wondering, they don't want a bar of him. So there you go. All right, on we go, guys. Going to be a big week. It's going to be a busy week here in the show.
Help us settle a debate, whether it be thoughtful or funny, even if we're all creatures of hate. It's a fine line that we're walking together. For better, push aside the temptation to berate. Let's take a note of the corners we stand in. As many points as the hairs on my chinny chin chin. When the news that we're watching is hairy, knowing all the things that we need to be wary of. Like the rich have the hand out for rewards, while the many have to work out what they can afford. And the rest of us ain't paying attention, or maybe have questions we're too worried to mention. Other media is still dwelling on trivial facts, vetting bees from the rice and the mice from the rats, and picking and choosing a warpath to run, and linking ourselves with the hill to die on. It's gotta come down to a welcoming vibe, with an A and a self and a higher in mind. All heavily, either this way or that, and will be analyzed by both Chewie and Pat. With the evil in the world trying to mess with your head, and you're sitting on the couch, you're thinking chivalry's dead. Each night, 2 nights, they're gonna sing you to bed.
Just a super chat that came in from Gold last minute. Ad hom is a specific thing. Ad hom, you're wrong because you're an idiot. Not ad hom, you're wrong and you're an idiot. Also, not ad hom, you're an idiot because you're wrong. There's a little bit of a language lesson before we go. Thanks to Citizen Gold. That's it for me, Chewie. Anything you want to throw out there before we go?
Yep, just one last thing. Jump on YouTube, search Anthony Bourdain, Iran. It's part of his Parts Unknown series. It is phenomenal. Parts Unknown, the whole thing's amazing. But that particular episode is so important right now.
All right. Cool. Thanks, Chewie. Thanks, team. We'll catch you all tomorrow night from 9 for another edition of Big Hearing News. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.